Today we're going to be talking about closing techniques in an interview and how you can properly close an interview. There are 10 different acceptable ways to close an interview, and we're going to go over each one of those very quickly. The first way is to offer an answer to questions. Basically what this means is that you should ask something along the lines of, do you have any other questions before we end this interview or before we hang up? When using this technique, you need to do two things. Number one, be as genuine as possible about wanting to hear what questions they have. Number two, you need to make sure you have enough time to answer their questions. You don't want to just give a 1 or 2 sentence answer and then hang up. They might have multiple questions, so only use this method when you have plenty of extra time left over after the interview. The second way is to use what's called a clearinghouse question. Now, the way this is different from asking for more questions is the fact that the question you ask is solely intended to make sure you covered everything in the interview. For example, you can say, are there any questions I have not addressed today, or are there any problems we have not taken into consideration? This makes sure that you cover all your bases and that both parties are clear that all the information they need to cover has been covered. The third type of closing an interview is completion of the intended purpose. The best way to do this is use the word well. When people hear the word well, they know that a conversation is wrapping up and ending. For example, you can state, well, that's all the questions I have time for today. As soon as the interviewee hears that word well, they know things are wrapping up and it's time to get going. You can also make personal inquiries. Now what this means is, like, are you still going to Arizona in January? Basically, when the subject changes away from the context of the original interview, they realize that it's over. They know that you are no longer talking about why you are interviewing them, and therefore the conversation is done. Next, you can make professional inquiries. It works in the exact same way, but instead of asking about their personal life, you ask about their professional life. Such as, when does your term on the city council begin? Or any other information you know about their professional life. Another way is signal that time is up. Sounds like a state. You tell them that your time is over and you have to go. That's all the time I have for today, or I'm afraid our time for our session's up. Would you like to meet next week? This allows the people to know that you're not rushing them out the door, but solely that you are on time constraints and have other things you need to do. You need to also, when using this, make sure you explain your reason for closing. For example, I must close the interview now because I have a previous appointment. You want to make sure that the person doesn't feel like you're trying to rush them out the door, and that's the risk you take with these types of closings. You can also express appreciation for satisfaction by saying thanks for their helps, or anything along that lines. You can arrange for a next meeting so long as that's what you need to do in your next step. Do not use this closing if you do not actually need to have a next meeting. Or the final way is through summarizing the interview. This is usually used in a professional setting, and you can say things along the lines of, I'm glad we got together, make sure we're ready for the board meeting next Wednesday. You'll be in charge of the PowerPoint, right? Things along those lines, where you just summarize what all you concluded that you need to get done. Also, you can close an interview with nonverbal cues. Some of these cues include straightening up in your seat, leaning forward, uncrossing your legs, placing your hands on your knees as if preparing to rise, breaking eye contact, offering to shake hands, making hand movements, or looking at the clock. You need to make very sure that you do not show any signs of these nonverbal closing techniques before you're ready to close an interview. Otherwise, this can give the interviewee the sense that they are being rushed out of the situation. So make sure you're aware of these and only use nonverbal or verbal closing techniques when you're actually ready to close your interview.